You know what time it is? Oh, I failed miserably. Let me try it one more time. Get it to I gotta figure out how people do that editing thing where like they'll throw something and it just like magically lands properly. There we go. Hi y'all. It's story time with Chris. Had a really good workout today and I'm about to go work out tomorrow. Got a couple of things to take care of tonight. I'm about to make an awesome dinner. Some baked barbecue chicken, broccoli, rice, jasmine. You cannot tell me I can't cook. Anybody, if you know, you know. Like, anybody that I've ever cooked for, or I've had friends come over for Sunday dinners when I used to do that, which potentially I'll be bringing that back. We'll see. It's just been super fun. These last few days have gotten a lot better for me, and it's just, I'm very grateful. That's the theme for tonight. And if I could find my eyeglass, and I can't find it, I'll have to look for it later. I was looking for something to clean my glasses, but I'll just use my hoodie. How's everybody doing? Everybody had a good day? And if you didn't have a good day, talk to me about it. We are back with the Silver Chair. We are going into chapter 9, actually. So we have 16 chapters. We're getting close to the end. I thought I was working tomorrow, and I am not. So I will be back here in the morning before I go work out to read some additional chapters for Story Time with Chris. Hi, Doreen. Thank you for enjoying my clumsiness earlier. For all my tea drinkers out there, get you a steeping mug. This thing is awesome. Shout out to the YS Village Herbal Shop, where I get my raw honey, my elderberry tincture, juice, and syrup, elderberry tea, sleep tincture, kava. So much great stuff. Show them some love, y'all. YS Village Herb Shop. And without further ado, we will begin. And of course, I don't own the music that you will hear in the background. Gotta say that for copyright purposes. Chapter 9. How they discovered something worth knowing. The others admitted afterward that Jill had been wonderful that day. As soon as the king and the rest of the hunting party had set off, she began making a tour of the whole castle and asking questions, but all in such an innocent, babyish way that no one could suspect her of any secret design. Though her tongue was never still, you could hardly say she talked. She prattled and giggled. She made love to everyone, the grooms, the porters, the housemaids, the ladies-in-waiting, and the elderly giant lords whose hunting days were past. To give some clarity, what that phrase means, it's a turn of phrase from back in the day where you just are bubbly and pleasant and childlike and mirthful. That's what that phrase means, just to clarify for those wondering. She submitted to being kissed and pawed about by any number of giantesses, many whom seemed sorry for her and called her a poor little thing, though none of them explained why. She made especial friends with the cook and discovered the all-important fact that there was a scullery door which let you out through the outer wall, so that you did not have to cross the courtyard or pass the great gateway. In the kitchen she pretended to be greedy and ate all sorts of scraps which the cook and scullions delighted to give her. But upstairs among the ladies she asked questions about how she would be dressed for the great feast, and how long she would be allowed to sit up, and whether she would dance with some very, very small giant. And then she would put her head over on one side in an idiotic fashion, which grown-ups, giant and otherwise, thought very fetching, and shake her curls and fidget and say, "Oh, I do wish it was tomorrow night, don't you? Do you think the time will go quickly till then?" And all the giantesses said she was a perfect little darling, and some of them dabbed their eyes with enormous handkerchiefs as if they were going to cry. "They're dear little things at that age," said one giantess to one another. "It seems almost a pity." Scrub and Puddleglum both did their best, but girls do that kind of thing better than boys. Even boys do it better than Marshwiggles. At lunchtime, something happened which made all three of them more anxious than ever to leave the castle of the gentle giants. They had lunch in the great hall at a little table of their own, near the fireplace. At a bigger table about 20 yards away, half a dozen old giants were lunching. Their conversation was so noisy and so high up in the air that the children soon took no more notice of it than you would of hooters outside the window or travel noises in the traffic of the street. They were eating cold venison, a kind of food which Jill had never tasted before. She was liking it. Suddenly, Puddleglum turned to them, and his face had gone so pale that you could see the paleness underneath the natural muddiness of his complexion. He said, "Don't eat another bite." "What's wrong?" asked the other two in a whisper. "Didn't you hear what those giants were saying? That's a nice tender haunch of venison," said one of them. "Then that stag was a liar," said another. "Why," said the first one. "Oh," said the other, "they said that when he was caught, he said, 'Don't kill me, I'm tough. You won't like me.'" For a moment, Jill did not realize the full meaning of this. But she did when Eustace's eyes opened wide with horror, and he said, "So we've been eating a talking stag?" This discovery didn't have exactly the same effect on all of them. Jill, who was new to that world, was sorry for the poor stag and thought it rotten of the giants to have killed him. Eustace, who had been in that world before and had at least one talking beast as his dear friend, felt horrified, as you might feel about a murder. But Puddleglum, who was Narnian born, was sick and faint, and felt as if you would feel if you found you had eaten a baby. "We've brought the anger of Aslan on us," he said. "That's what comes of not attending to the signs. We're under a curse, I suspect. If it wasn't allowed, it would be the best thing we could do to take these knives and drive them into our own hearts." And gradually, even Jill came to see it for its point of view. At any rate, none of them wanted any more lunch, and as soon as they thought it was safe, they crept quietly out of the hall. It was now drawing near to the time of the day in which their hopes of escape depended, and all became nervous. They hung about in passages and waited for things to become quiet. The giants in the hall sat on a dreadfully long time after the meal was over. The bald one was telling a story. When that was over, the three travelers dawdled down to the kitchen, but there were still plenty of giants there, or at least in the scullery, washing up and putting things away. It was agonizing, waiting till these finished their jobs and one by one wiped their hands and went away. At last, only one old giantess was left in the room. She pottered about, and at last the three travelers realized with horror that she did not intend to go away at all. "Well, dearie," she said to them, "that job's about through. Let's put the kettle there. That'll make a nice cup of tea presently. Now I can have a little bit of rest." She looked into the scullery. "Look, good puppets, and tell me if the back door is open." "Yes, it is," said Eustace. "That's right. I always leave it open so as Puss can get in and out, the poor thing." Puss is a kitchen cat. Then she sat down on one chair and put her feet up on another. "I don't know as I mightn't have 40 winks," said the giantess. "If only that blarmy hunting party doesn't come back too soon." All their spirits leaped up when she mentioned 40 winks, and flopped down again when she mentioned the return of the hunting party. "When do they usually come back?" asked Jill. "You can never tell," said the giantess. "But there, go and be quiet for a bit, my dearies." They retreated to the far end of the kitchen and would have slipped out into the scullery there, and then if the giantess had not sat up, opened her eyes, and brushed away a fly. "Don't try it till we're sure she's really asleep," whispered Eustace, "or it'll spoil everything." So they all huddled at the kitchen end, waiting and watching. The thought that the hunters might come back at any moment was terrible, and the giantess was fidgety. Whenever they thought she had really gone to sleep, she moved. "I can't bear this," thought Jill. To distract her mind, she began looking about her. Just in front of her was a clean, wide table with 2 clean pie dishes on it and an open book. They were great pie dishes, of course, for giants, Jill thought that she could just lie down just comfortably in one of them. Then she climbed up on the bench inside the table to look at the book. She read, "Mallard. This delicious bird can be cooked in a variety of ways." "It's a cookery book," thought Jill without much interest, and glanced over her shoulder. The giantess's eyes were shut, but she didn't look as if she were properly asleep. Jill glanced back at the book. It was arranged alphabetically, and at the very next entry her heart seemed to stop beating. It ran, "Man. This elegant little biped has long been valued as a delicacy. It forms a traditional part of the autumn feast and is served between the fish and the joint. Each man—" But she could not bear to read any more. She turned around. The giantess had waked up and was having a fit of coughing. Jill nudged the other 2 and pointed to the book. They also mounted the bench and bent over the huge pages. Scrub was still reading about how to cook men when Puddleglum pointed to the next entry below it. It was like this: "Marshwiggle. Some authorities reject this animal altogether as unfit for giants' consumption because of its stringy consistency and muddy flavor. The flavor can, however, be greatly reduced if—" Jill touched his feet and Eustace's gently. All 3 looked back at the giantess. Her mouth was slightly open, and from her nose there came a sound which at that moment was more welcome to them than any music. She snored. And now was a question of tiptoe work, not daring to go too fast, hardly daring to breathe, out through the scullery, out at last into the pale sunlight of a winter afternoon. They were at the top of a rough little path which ran steeply down, and thank heavens on the right side of the castle the city ruinous was in sight. In a few minutes they were back on the broad, steep road which led down from the main gate of the castle. They were also in full view from every single window on that side. If it had been 1 or 2 or 5 windows, there'd be a reasonable chance that no one might be looking out. But there was nearer 50 than 5. They now realized, too, that the road on which they were, and indeed all the ground between them and the city ruinous, didn't offer as much cover as would hide a fox. It was all coarse grass and pebbles and flat stones. To make things worse, they were now in the clothes that the giants had provided them last night, except Puddleglum, whom nothing would fit. Jill wore a vivid green robe, rather too large for her, and over that a scarlet mantle fringed with white fur. Eustace had scarlet stockings, blue tunic and cloak, a gold-hilted sword, and a feathered bonnet. "Fine bits of colour you 2 are," muttered Puddleglum. "Show up very prettily on a winter day. The worst archer in the world couldn't miss either of you if you were in range. And talking of archers, we'll be sorry not to have our own bows before long. I shouldn't wonder. Bit thin, too. Those clothes of yours, are they?" "Yes, I'm freezing already," said Jill. A few minutes ago, when they had been in the kitchen, she had thought if only they could once get out of the castle, their escape would be almost complete. She now realized that the most dangerous part of it was still to come. Excuse me, y'all. Sorry. "Steady, steady," said Puddleglum. "Don't look back. Don't walk too quickly. Whatever you do, don't run. Look as if you were just taking a stroll, and then if anyone sees us, he might just possibly not bother. The moment we look like people running away, we're done." The distance to the city ruinous seemed longer than Jill would have believed possible, but bit by bit they were covering it. Then came a noise. The other 2 gasped. Jill, who didn't know what it was, said, "What's that?" "Hunting horn," whispered Eustace. "But don't run even now," said Puddleglum. "Not till I give the word." This time Jill couldn't help glancing over her shoulder. There, about half a mile away, was the hunting party returning from behind them on the left. They walked on. Suddenly a great clamor of giant voices arose, then shouts and hollers. "They've seen us! "Run!" said Puddleglum. Jill gathered up her long skirts, horrible things for running in, and ran. There was no mistaking the danger now. She could hear the music of the hounds. She could hear the king's voice roaring out, "After them! After them, or we'll have no man pies tomorrow!" She was last of the three now, cumbered with her dress, slipping on loose stones, her hair getting in her mouth, running pains across her chest. The hounds were much nearer. Now she had to run uphill up the stony slope which led to the lowest step of the giant stairway. She had no idea what they would do when they got there, and how they would be any better off when they reached the top. But she didn't think about it. She was like a hunted animal now. As long as the pack was after her, she must run till she dropped. The marsh wiggle was ahead, and as he came to the lowest step, he stopped, looked a little to his right, and all of a sudden darted into a little hole or crevice at the bottom of it, his long legs disappearing into it, looked very like those of a spider. Eustace hesitated and then vanished after him. Jill, breathless and reeling, came to the place about a minute later. It was an unattractive hole, a crack between the earth and the stone about 3 feet long and hardly more than a foot high. You had to fling yourself flat on your face and crawl in. You couldn't do it so very quickly either. She felt sure that a dog's teeth would close on her heel before she got inside. "Quick, quick, stones, fill up the opening," came Puddleglum's voice in the darkness beside her. It was pitch black in there. Except for the gray light in the opening by which they had crawled in, the other two were working hard. She could see Eustace's small hands and the Marshwiggle's big, frog-like hands black against the light, working desperately to pile up stones. Then she realized how important this was and began groping for large stones herself and handing them to the others. Before the dogs were baying and yelping at the cave mouth, they had it pretty well filled. And now, of course, there was no light at all. "Farther in, quick," said Puddleglum's voice. "Let's all hold hands," said Jill. "Good idea," said Eustace. But it took them quite a long time to find one another's hands in the darkness. The dogs were sniffing at the other side of the barrier now. "Try if we can stand up," suggested Eustace. They did, and found that they could. Then Puddleglum holding out a hand behind him to Eustace, and Eustace holding a hand out behind him to Jill, they began groping with their feet and stumbling forward into the blackness. It was all loose stones underfoot. Then came Puddleglum up to a wall of rock, There was a good many more twists and turns. Jill had no sense of direction at all, and no idea where the mouth of the cave lay. "The question is," came Puddleglum's voice out of the darkness ahead, "whether taking one thing with another, it would be better to go back and give the giants a treat at that feast of theirs, instead of losing our way in the guts of a hill where 10 to 1 there's dragons and deep holes and gases and water and... Ow! Let go! Save yourself! After that, all happened quickly. There was a wild cry, a swishing, dusty, gravelly voice, a rattling of stones, and Jill found herself sliding, hopelessly sliding quicker every moment down a slope that grew steeper every moment. It was not a smooth, firm slope, but a slope of small stones and rubbish. Even if you could have stood up, it would have been no use. Any bit of that slope you put your foot on would have slid away from under you and carried you down with it. But Jill was far more lying than standing, and the further they had slid, the more they disturbed all the stones and earth, so that the general downward rush of everything got faster and louder and dustier and dirtier. From the sharp cries and swearing of the other two, Jill got the idea that many of the stones she was dislodging were hitting Eustace and Puddleglum pretty hard. And now she was going at a furious rate and felt she would be broken to bits at the bottom. Yet somehow they weren't. There were a mass of bruises, and the wet, sticky stuff on her face appeared to be blood. And such a mass of loose earth, shingle, and large stones were piled up round her that she couldn't get up. The darkness was so complete that it made no difference at all whether you had your eyes open or shut. There was no noise. And that was the very worst moment Jill had ever known in her life. Supposing she was alone, supposing the others, then she heard movements around her. And presently all three, in shaken voices, were explaining that none of them seemed to have any broken bones. "We can never get up there again," said Eustace's voice. "Have you noticed how warm it is?" said the voice of Puddleglum. "That means we're a long way down. Might be nearly a mile." No one said anything. Some time later, Puddleglum added, "My tinderbox is gone." After another long pause, Jill said, "I'm terribly thirsty." No one suggested doing anything. There was so obviously nothing to be done for the moment that they did not feel it quite so badly as one might have expected. That was because they were so tired. Long afterward, without the slightest warning, an utterly strange voice spoke. They knew at once that it was not the one voice in the whole world for which each had secretly been hoping, the voice of Aslan. It was a dark, flat voice, almost as if you know what that means. A pitch-black voice. It said,
"What make you here, creatures of the overworld?"
And that is where we will end for tonight. We have 6 chapters left. Thank you so much, y'all, for tuning in. I hope you have a really good time. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel because I need at least 1,000 subscribers in order to go live on YouTube so I can perform Storytime with Chris on one singular platform rather than 2. Because I have a lot of my Facebook friends that watch these videos and enjoy them, but I also want to be able to incorporate that into the YouTube channel. So please, 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 please subscribe to YouTube, like, share with your friends. Please enjoy this. I'll see y'all later.